Hey, I'm Chuck Grainger, and I'm with Grainger Legal Services in Montgomery, Alabama, and we're a bankruptcy firm. We get asked a lot of times by our clients, well, should I file Chapter 7 or not? A lot of times people hear that's a great deal, and I think it is for a lot of people. But it varies as to what you should do, and you really should consult with an attorney in your area that knows the law and how it's applied in your area to find out what your rights are, because a lot of times whether you qualify for a Chapter 7 and whether you might lose property in a Chapter 7 might be governed by local laws in your area. So it's really important that you keep an open mind about it, maybe consider it. I think you should consider it, but make sure that you're understanding how it would apply to you. And I can't do that in this video, but I can give you some of the principles based on our experience here and how we apply it. Now, I really like Chapter 7s. I, in general, would prefer to file a Chapter 7 for one of my clients. It's all over and done with. What you do is you pay for it and you get the paperwork done. We get the case filed. A month later, you go to court and you answer 3 or 4 minutes worth of questions from the trustee. And then after that, basically, you're just waiting on the order to come in the mail and it's all over with. And so the whole process usually takes 4, maybe 5 months. I like that. And it's also something that gives you more certainty, because Chapter 13 payment plans, they can fail because you don't pay them. Maybe you can afford to pay them for 2 years and then you lose your job or get in a wreck. And so then you can't pay it, so the case gets dismissed. And when that happens, you go back to owing all that money again. Whereas if you'd just done a Chapter 7 and gotten it over with, you would have been home free. So I like doing Chapter 7s for people, but still only about 23% of our cases are Chapter 7 cases. And so why is that? Why is it that the vast majority of bankruptcy cases filed here in this district, 85% of them are not Chapter 7s? Well, first of all, Chapter 7s only deal with a particular type of debt effectively, and that's unsecured debt. Now, a lot of what people owe is unsecured debt. That would be things like medical bills, or credit card debt, or maybe a signature loan. Or many people nowadays get caught up in these predatory loans from these small loan companies and payday loans. It deals with that sort of debt, and it allows you to get out of it in one whack. It's like setting off a nuclear bomb and killing that unsecured debt, and I like that about Chapter 7. I just thinking about it, I don't think I've had one that has failed. I may have and just not remember it, but I filed quite a few of them, and I think that they're very successful. I would say at least a 95% success rate with Chapter 7 cases. Whereas in our district, Chapter 13 payment plans, people will only pay all the way to the end. Usually it's a 5-year payment plan. About 40% of the time will they pay all the way to the end and get a discharge. And that's not a very good track record. I checked ours a few years ago. Ours is a little higher than that. We're running about 73%. But still, we have a lot of our clients in file a Chapter 13 and something happens to them to where they can't complete their payment plan. We try to help them look at other options at that time. But still, there's more risk of failure if you file a Chapter 13 than if you file a Chapter 7. So why isn't everybody filing Chapter 7? Well, I mentioned already the fact that Chapter 7 just deals with unsecured debt. If you're behind on a house or a car, you don't need to be in a Chapter 7. Unless you plan on giving those things up, and sometimes people do. Maybe they plan on moving, getting a job out of state. Maybe they're upside down on a car and their mother's going to let them drive their car. There's any number of circumstances. But another factor is the upfront costs. When we do a Chapter 13 case, we just collect $50 of the filing fee, which we pay down when we file that case on the filing fee. The filing fee in a Chapter 13 is $310. So our clients will pay the balance of $260 of the filing fee plus their attorney fees through their payment plan. Whereas a Chapter 7 case, the entire filing fee and the entire attorney fee have to be paid before it's filed. And so that creates an obstacle for many people, because often by the time someone goes to see a lawyer, they're not in a position to write you a check for your attorney fees and your filing fee. It's that simple. And yet they may ought to be in a Chapter 7 except for that problem. And oftentimes they may get their money from a family member or a friend and maybe pay them back later. Sometimes people might have garage sales and so forth to try and raise the money. It's such a good deal that if the only problem is coming up with the money, it really is worth looking at. We let people make payments to us before we file it, and then once they pay it off, we'll go ahead and file it. So, but the upfront cost is usually a serious obstacle for most people. There's another limitation in Chapter 7. You are limited in how much property you can keep. And if you got a car that's paid off and it's worth $25,000, you're probably going to lose that car if you file Chapter 7. On the other hand, if you owe money on it and maybe it's worth less than what you owe on it, or it's only worth a little bit more than what you own it, you're probably going to keep it. So most of the time it'll work out fine, but you need to let your lawyer look at it. In Alabama, we have two main exemptions that we use. One is for household goods and personal property. We use that for like TVs, sofas, washers and dryers, equity in a car. Maybe you got an old car that's paid off. Each person that files a Chapter 7 in that case gets a $7,500 exemption, and that usually covers everything people have. I would say over 70% of the time the exemptions are going to protect everything you got. When it doesn't, then maybe you should consider a Chapter 13, or at least be open to losing something and going ahead and doing a Chapter 7 just to get it all over with and get a fresh start. Chapter 7s do give people a fresh start, and I really like that. Oftentimes people need that. Another limitation on how much property you can keep in a Chapter 7 is on real estate. Say like if you own your home, it's worth $200,000 and you owe $100,000. In that example, you have $100,000 in equity. That's quite a bit of equity in that house. If it's a married couple, they each have a $15,000 homestead exemption, and that's $30,000. Well, that's not enough to cover $100,000, and you've got a risk in that example of the trustee selling that house, taking the equity out of it and dividing it up amongst the creditors so they get paid some or all of what they're owed. And so that is a consideration as well in deciding whether to proceed with a Chapter 7. Another problem is for when people are behind on their house or a car. Normally, to keep a house or a car in a Chapter 7 case, you just do that by signing a reaffirmation agreement. And creditors are almost always willing to do that. It's never really been a problem for us to get that done. But they won't do it if you're behind on it. So one of the factors you got to consider is if you're behind on the car or if you're behind on the house and you want to keep that, and you want to reaffirm it, you've got to factor in not only the cost of the bankruptcy and paying for it up front, but the cost of getting caught up on the house or the car. But if you can pull that off, you can stay with a Chapter 7 a lot of times. Now another factor is passing something called the means test. The means test is a very complex test. It's a formula that Congress put into the bankruptcy code. When we print it out, it's about 12 or 13 pages long. And to discuss it with any sense of intelligence would go way beyond the scope of this video. It probably deserves its own video or a series of videos. But suffice to say, if you are above median income for your household size, then you may not pass the means test. If you are below median income for your household size, then you have passed the means test. So qualifying for a Chapter 7 is important. Another thing that might disqualify you for a Chapter 7 would be whether you've had a previous bankruptcy, because that goes into consideration as well. Still, Chapter 7s, they have more success to me. If someone qualifies for a Chapter 7, if we file that case, I'm almost positive it's going to work. And I say that simply because I can't remember one that didn't. But if it's a Chapter 13, I know we're in it for 5 years during that payment plan, and things come up. People get in car wrecks, they lose their job, they go through a divorce. Just things happen to people over 5 years, and there's more risk of failure. So if a person does qualify for a Chapter 7 and it appears that they may be able to pull that off, I'm going to encourage them to. And I think that if perhaps if more lawyers encourage people to do Chapter 7s, we might not have such a high failure rate in Chapter 13s, because sometimes people are doing Chapter 13s who really ought to be in a Chapter 7. So I hope that information gives you a little bit of insight into Chapter 7s. There's certainly no way I could cover it all in a short video, but I hope it gives you at least a sketch of it. And certainly if you're in our area, which is Montgomery, Prattville, and Troy, Alabama, you're welcome to call us and make an appointment and let us evaluate your situation so we can figure out what you need to do. So anyway, if you want to call us or text us, you can call or text us at 334-260-0500. Thank you for your attention.